But if it goes the way Ben wants it to, then that could be sold in the UK. But equally, it could be sold as a pretty decent fight in the US as well. But he seems to be calling everyone out, and then people have called him out, and he's dismissing them. Josh Kelly being one of them I saw on X. What do you think, Eamon? Who do you think Ben should fight next? But also who do you think Ben's likely to fight next?
Yeah, I actually quite like that Mario Barrios fight, to be fair. I think Barrios was coming off with a win against Yordenis Ugas, really kind of put a beating on Ugas, who was going into that fight, I think, the favourite. I think obviously Ugas is probably feeling the effects of his career heading into that fight as well too. But nonetheless, Barrios got the win, and Barrios is very much an all-action, entertaining fighter. Throws a lot of punches, doesn't really take a step backwards. Sorry, does take the step forwards. That's kind of the same sort of thing with Ben, although Ben was pushed back a little bit more in the last fight with Pete Dobson, which I was ringside for, and shipped a lot of shots. Actually, Dobson, although he didn't get the win, some people were picking him for the win in that fight. At least exposed some of the holes in the game, which haven't been exposed for a while, considering Ben's opponents have been the likes of Chris Algieri, good fighter, but not the fighter he once was. Samuel Vargas, good fighter, not the fighter he once was. Van Heerden as well, too. Credible enough opponent if it was a few years back, not the fighter he once was. So that kind of picking off those sort of fringish world level type names, or ones that have accomplished something in Algeria, former world champion, such. So to get Barrios in the ring is a much more of a live opponent than the others that we've seen in recent future, but doesn't bode well as that big fight that maybe we were looking for Ben when the likes of Eubank Jr. was talked about. That seems to have been and gone now, really. Even with the appeal, if it's successful in that point, that kind of feels like the ship has sailed. Errol Spence, I don't know, he's on his own sort of timeline, isn't he, with the recovery from injury? And I imagine someone like Spence, I know he hasn't in the past, but he might want that softish touch before he goes into a big fight. Not that I'm saying that Ben is that big fight, but even then to just have a little bit of softer throw to go back into like a Crawford rematch or whatever it is, if he even decides to continue on. We'll see what he's like. He will give us the intentions.
So a bit of a left field one here from, a bit of a left field one here from Thunder Road. Says, would you and Eamon consider using your middle initials to sound more professional, like Gareth A. Davies and Stephen A. Smith? Eamon Akon, like the musician Akon, has a nice ring to it. What do you think, Akon?
I don't know. I don't like my middle initial, so I'll pass. Oh, sorry, my middle name, so I'll pass on that. But no, I went by a different moniker in the past as well too, which is my Twitter name, and I've ditched that as well now. So I'll pass on that, but I won't pass on a Gervonta Davis fight against Conor Benn, because Davis, wasn't he reported to be wanting to have a fight in the UK this year, or at least his next fight will be in the UK, which is a very weird thing for Davis to want to come back. You'd feel like all his opponents would be over in America. But what with everything going on in America right now with the deals and such, where does Davis kind of stand with everything? So that makes sense for Gervonta Davis and Conor Benn, to Davis coming up this time to welterweight. I don't think Conor Benn's going to drop down any further, really, though you feel like Ben probably maybe could do, but I don't think he would. But would Davis want to take on Ben? Does he particularly care about Ben's current situation? Could that happen in the UK, or could it happen elsewhere? I don't know. It's just an appealing enough fight, and I'm sure a lot of boxing fans, hardcore boxing fans, would like to see Davis and Ben in the ring. Brook, I think that's a bit of an outside shout as well to happen. Although, look, I know a lot of people want to see Kell Brook sail off into the sunset, but there seems to be a bit of life in Kell Brook, who seems to have interest in returning back to the ring, although against more so Eubank Jr. than Conor Benn. Could Kell Brook be coaxed back in if enough money is put in front of him to fight Conor Benn? I think there's still life in that. So most likely for me, Barrios. Then I don't know where this Davis's thing is going, so I'll probably say Brook, then Davis. Josh Kelly put out a pretty cool little tweet. I thought it was very, very good. Don't think it's likely that we'll see Josh Kelly in the ring with Conor Benn for quite a while, but I don't know. I think the Barrios one seems to be the one we're heading towards.
Yeah, I think Josh Kelly would be a really good fight, but because they're with different promoters and Kelly hasn't got the profile of a Eubank Jr., for example, and I guess that's still a possibility, yeah, he's probably not going to get that fight. That's what Danny B. Flexen thinks anyway. Yeah, I'm not sure about that. Like Michael B. Jordan, I don't know. I don't know if I can pull it off. I'm not like Michael B. Jordan, funnily enough. We often get confused for each other, though.
Danny, sorry to interrupt your flow. I apologize. I should have mentioned this as well. The fight I actually want to see is Conor Benn and David Avanesyan. That's the fight I want to see. Don't know why I didn't mention that. And if I was Ben's team or looking at Avanesyan now, I know they said the profile thing and whatever, putting that to a side, I see David Avanesyan as someone who's been beaten, he's been out of the ring, he's had a bounce-back fight that didn't really mean too much. And if you're looking at someone right now who's a credible name, boxing hardcore fans who you want to appeal to, want to see that fight, want to see you in tough, you'd be looking at Avanesyan, someone else. That's the time to get him. Coming off a defeat, bouncing back, but not having activity. You've had a bit more of activity. That's the fight I point towards if it's not any of the other names.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing is, if you're going to make the Avanesyan fight, that's one that does need to take place in the UK. Now, I agree. I think Avanesyan is a great test for Ben. I think he's coming off that loss to Crawford as well. So if Ben could do a better job on him, I mean, he was dominated against Crawford, but if Ben could maybe stop him earlier or something like that, or even does as good a job as Crawford, it immediately kind of elevates his name, puts his profile up there, and then he can start calling for those bigger fights with some level of credibility. But so much rests, and in terms of the offers being made as well, if the money that's being put on offer for the likes of Gervonta Davis are based on Conor Benn's ability to sell well in the UK, or the ability of a Gervonta to come over and make a big stir in this country, we need to know if Ben is going to be able to fight here. Now, just give to people out there a bit of an update. So Conor Benn was planning to apply for a British Boxing Board of Control license, a new one, after his one was suspended, or he actually gave it back initially when the failed test first came out. And the board said, Robert Smith had said the board would not consider a license application from Conor Benn until the outcome of the appeal from both the Board of Control and from UKAD against the independent panel's decision to lift Conor Benn's suspension. So Conor Benn was suspended from fighting in the UK after the VADA tests. The two separate tests that came up as adverse findings for clomiphene. Since then, an independent panel listened to Benn's evidence, decided to lift the suspension. The rumour is, and this hasn't been confirmed, I don't think, but it's because of the jurisdiction that UKAD don't have a right to make the ruling on a VADA test, or VADA test shouldn't be considered. But whatever the reason, the suspension was lifted. So, in essence, Conor Benn would be able to fight in the UK based on that ruling. But then the board and UKAD both appealed against that decision. They felt it was wrong. They felt he should still be under suspension. And the board will not consider Conor Benn for a new Board of Control license until their appeal has been heard once again. And that should be later this month. That's what they were saying. There's now, Eddie Hearn hasn't revealed the actual date, but he said there is a date in place for February. So we expect that soon. And then Conor Benn can then make an informed decision over where and who against his next fight should be. But I think Avanesyan's would be a cracking fight. I think Michael McKinson as well, you know, with his recent fight over in the US against Virgil Ortiz, he proved a lot of his mettle and his toughness. And he's a very skillful fighter as well, very awkward. I think that would be a really good test for Ben. I think McKinson and Avanesyan both. But the same thing, they need to be in the UK. They're not fights that should be in the US. I can't imagine Hearn's made a massive profit on Ben's last couple of fights against Peter Dobson and the one before that when Ben first came back. I think they want him to fight in the UK. I think so much of boxing's taking place in Saudi at the moment. You need, and Hearn mentioned this in a recent interview, you need those big UK stars. You need to remember the UK market. And Conor Benn's key to that. You know, he does do big numbers over here, both digitally and on Sky Sports viewing figures and so on. Sorry, not Sky Sports, DOESN viewing figures and so on. Oof, strike me down to say a few Hail Marys for getting that wrong. But yeah, so Conor Benn, we need to know if he can fight back in the UK. And then the likes of Avanesyan and Michael McKinson, even Kell Brook, become much more likely. Eubank Jr. too, because once Conor Benn's got a board license again, I think that brings that fight right back on the table. But until then, and if we are planning, I'm not saying we, but if Eddie Hearn's planning for Ben's next fight to be in the US, I think Mario Barrios, and maybe as an outside choice, Gervonta Davis are more likely.